The air was crisp and thin in the high altitudes of the Rockies, the kind that carried both promise and peril for those who dared to wander too deep. The elderly hiker, a man in his late 70s but still sharp in his stride and strong in his resolve, adjusted the straps of his weathered backpack as he started down the trail. His white hair peeked out beneath a faded cap, and his boots, broken in from decades of use, crunched over loose gravel and pine needles. For him, the mountains were not just wilderness, they were home. He had spent much of his life walking these ridges, listening to the rush of alpine streams, and marveling at the jagged snow-capped peaks. Friends often joked that the forest knew him by name. He was cautious, experienced, and never one to underestimate nature. That was why, when he failed to return, no one could understand how the mountains had swallowed him whole. The morning of his departure seemed ordinary. Locals remembered seeing him at the small-town general store the day before, stocking up on trail mix, jerky, and a new coil of rope. He greeted people warmly, sharing stories about the trails he planned to explore. He had mentioned venturing off the marked paths, following some old logging roads that had been long forgotten. There was a glint of excitement in his eyes, the same youthful spark that had carried him through countless hikes in the past. He told one man, half-jokingly, that he wanted to find a place untouched, where the forest still kept its secrets. The man laughed, but later would recall those words with an unsettling chill. When he set off, the sun was still climbing above the horizon, painting the mountaintops in soft gold. His trekking poles tapped steadily against the earth as he climbed higher, pausing every so often to take in the views of sweeping valleys below. He kept a notebook in his pocket, scribbling notes about plants and trail markers as he went. Though alone, he walked with the ease of someone who felt safe in solitude, someone who had walked this wilderness more times than he could count. Hours passed, and the trail thinned into rougher terrain, but his pace never faltered. By evening, when he should have returned to camp, silence followed instead. At first, no one worried. He had often extended hikes by a day if he found a new ridge or valley to explore. But as night fell, and the town grew quiet, unease began to spread. Calls went unanswered. A friend drove to the trailhead where his old pickup truck still sat parked, the windows fogged with the chill of the mountain night. That was when concern hardened into fear. The following morning, search and rescue teams assembled. Helicopters flew low over dense forests, their rotors thundering across the valleys. Volunteers hiked tirelessly, combing through rocky outcrops, riverbeds, and gullies where someone could easily fall or become trapped. Dogs were brought in, noses pressed to the hiker's jacket left in his truck. They followed faint scents that led into the forest, only to lose the trail abruptly among the pines. It was as if he had walked into the trees and disappeared into thin air. Days turned into weeks. The search widened, with dozens of men and women scouring miles of rugged terrain. Still, no trace. Not a boot print in the mud, not a scrap of fabric caught on a thorn, not a dropped tool or broken branch that hinted at a struggle. The forest was eerily silent, offering no clues. Some searchers swore the area felt different, as though the woods themselves were watching, holding their secrets close. Others whispered quietly among themselves that it was unnatural. Someone with his experience should have left signs, however faint. The town, small and tightly knit, felt the loss deeply. At the local diner, where he had once shared stories over coffee, his absence was felt in every empty seat. Flyers with his picture, smiling in a wide-brimmed hat, a trail map in hand, were tacked up across bulletin boards and trailheads. As days stretched into months, hope began to dim, though no one dared say it aloud. The official search was eventually called off, but locals still hiked out now and then, scanning ridges and valleys for any sign of him. Each time, they returned empty-handed. His family held a small memorial near the edge of the forest, but even then, no one was fully convinced he was gone. The mountains had taken him, yes, but in a way that defied understanding. No storm had swept through, no animal tracks led astray, and no gear was found abandoned. It was as if the Rockies had opened up and swallowed him whole. And in that silence, mystery began to take root, spreading like the shadows between the trees. 2 years can feel like an eternity when a mystery lingers unsolved, yet in the small town nestled near the Rockies, the disappearance of the elderly hiker remained fresh in everyone's mind. At first, there had been hope, fueled by search efforts, news coverage, and the unshakable belief that a man so seasoned in the wilderness could not simply vanish. But as months turned to seasons, hope dulled into silence, and the unanswered questions began to twist into stories, theories, and suspicions. Around campfires and in diners, the talk was constant, even if hushed. Some were convinced he had succumbed to the elements. The Rockies, after all, were unforgiving. A single slip on loose scree, a hidden ravine cloaked in shadow, or the swift pull of an icy current could claim even the most skilled hiker. In that version of events, his body was simply hidden in places too remote, too treacherous to be found. But others were not so easily convinced. A man like him, one old friend argued, would have left something behind. A mark, a signal, anything. That sentiment only deepened the sense of unease. Theories multiplied. Some whispered about predators. The Rockies were home to mountain lions and bears, and while attacks were rare, they were not unheard of. People imagined him stumbling upon a protective sow, or being stalked in silence through the timber until it was too late. But again, no trace, no torn clothing, no blood, no signs of struggle. Others began to suggest darker possibilities. Had someone followed him into the wilderness? Could he have crossed paths with the wrong person, someone living off-grid, fiercely territorial and unwilling to share their hidden refuge? It was not entirely unheard of. Rumors had always swirled about hermits or drifters carving out secret lives in the wild. Over time, the mystery became part of the town's identity. Newcomers were told the story the way one might share a local legend, an elderly man, swallowed by the forest, never seen again. But with each retelling, the edges of fact blurred with speculation. Teenagers dared one another to hike into the areas where he was last seen. Some claimed they heard strange noises there at night, echoing metallic sounds, like tools clanging in the distance, or sharp cracks that weren't quite thunder. An uneasy superstition began to settle over the trails, and though no official warnings were ever posted, many locals quietly avoided the remotest paths, unwilling to test their luck. The hiker's family found little comfort. His daughter, who had come from out of state during the search, returned every summer to walk the trails herself. She left small markers, ribbons tied to branches, stones arranged carefully on the ground, hoping, perhaps, that her father might see them, or that she might stumble upon the slightest clue that the official searches had missed. Each time, she returned empty-handed, her face weathered not from the sun but from the burden of unanswered grief. Meanwhile, a few voices suggested something few wanted to consider, that perhaps the old man had chosen to disappear. He had spoken often of solitude, of the peace he found in the high ridges where no human sound carried. Some believed he might have found a hidden valley or cave, and simply decided not to return. A man like that, one local muttered over coffee, maybe he just wanted the mountains to be his last home. While the idea struck some as romantic, it unsettled others. Choosing silence, cutting off from family and friends without a word, felt colder than any accidental fate. As the 2 years passed, the forest itself seemed to grow heavier with the weight of the mystery. Hikers reported an eerie feeling in certain stretches, as though the trees pressed closer, the air colder. Some claimed to have spotted strange markers in the woods, carved notches on trees, or small structures of branches that did not appear naturally formed. Each story was small, unproven, often dismissed as tricks of the eye or the imagination of someone spooked. Yet they all added to the sense that something was hidden in those mountains, something tied to the hikers' vanishing. For the rangers who patrolled the Rockies, the case lingered as an unresolved scar. They had walked those slopes countless times, trained eyes searching for the smallest disturbance, but the forest had given nothing back. It was unsettling. Cases usually ended with some sign, gear, bones, a campsite left behind. This one was different. The silence was absolute, and in that silence, suspicion festered. By the end of the second year, the community had stopped expecting closure. The hiker's name faded from the news and official reports, but his absence remained a presence, unseen, but always there. A story locals could not escape, a shadow that followed anyone daring enough to step into the backcountry. The mystery was no longer just about one man, it had become a part of the land itself, woven into the whispers of the forest, waiting to be disturbed. The discovery came on a gray morning when 2 forest rangers were patrolling an unmarked stretch of the Rockies that most hikers never reached. The air was damp from the previous night's rain, and fog clung low between the trees, muting the world into shades of green and gray. Their boots sank slightly into soft earth as they followed a faint game trail, the kind used by elk and deer rather than people. They were not expecting anything unusual. The patrol was routine, meant only to check for storm damage or signs of illegal hunting. But what they stumbled upon that day would alter the mystery of the vanished hiker in a way no one had anticipated. The first sign that something was wrong came in the form of disturbed soil. One of the rangers noticed it, an uneven patch where the forest floor had been carefully brushed over with leaves and pine needles. At first, he assumed it might be the work of animals, perhaps a bear digging for roots or a coyote burying scraps. But when he crouched down for a closer look, he noticed something unnatural. The ground had been packed too evenly, covered with care, as if someone had wanted to hide what lay beneath. He brushed the debris aside with his gloved hand, and his stomach tightened. There, stretched between two trees no more than a foot off the ground, was a thin, nearly invisible line of wire. It ran taut across the path, positioned at exactly the height of a man's shin. The ranger froze, his heart thudding as the realization hit him. This was no accident. Someone had set a tripwire. "Stop," he called to his partner, his voice low but urgent. The other ranger, a few steps ahead, halted. Immediately. Both men had enough experience to know that in places like this, carelessness could mean disaster. Slowly, carefully, they examined the setup. The wire led back toward a crude but effective mechanism, a bundle of sharpened stakes lashed together with rope, held under tension by a bent sapling. If triggered, the trap would swing violently across the trail, striking anyone who passed. The design was primitive, but it was deadly. The two men exchanged a look that carried the weight of 1,000 questions. Who had built this? And why here, so deep in the backcountry where few ever ventured? They marked the area carefully, their training kicking in, and radioed for backup. For the moment, they dared not move further. Disarming such a device without expertise was risky. One wrong motion and the trap could spring, turning the discovery into tragedy. When additional rangers and law enforcement arrived, the forest seemed to tighten around them, every rustle of wind in the branches carrying a hint of menace. The team moved slowly, documenting every detail, photographing the trap, and measuring its placement. It was not the kind of thing built in haste. Whoever had made it had knowledge of tension, leverage, and concealment. This was intentional. As they spread out, searching for more, one ranger spotted something caught on a low branch a short distance away. It was a scrap of faded fabric, torn and frayed by weather. The color matched the jacket the missing hiker had been wearing when he vanished 2 years earlier. The fabric was too small to serve as proof, but it was enough to send a ripple of unease through the group. The proximity to the trap was chilling. Had the old man stumbled upon this very mechanism? Had he been caught in it, injured beyond the ability to return? Or worse, had he seen something he wasn't meant to see? The forest that day seemed to close in with a heavy silence. Every snapped twig underfoot sounded too loud, every shadow too deep. The rangers couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been here recently, someone who didn't want their presence discovered. Yet, the trap was weathered, its ropes stiff with age, its stakes darkened by rain and rot. It had been waiting for a long time. The discovery spread quickly once reported. Investigators poured into the site, their questions multiplying. If the trap was connected to the missing hiker, it opened doors to troubling possibilities. Was he its victim? Or had he been the one who set it, in a desperate attempt to protect himself from some unseen threat? The idea unsettled even the most rational minds. The elderly hiker was known for his calm wisdom, not paranoia, yet the mountains had a way of changing people. As night fell over the ridge and the team carefully dismantled the trap, one fact became impossible to ignore: this was no accident of nature. Someone had gone to great effort to build it and conceal it. The Rockies, long feared for their natural dangers, now seemed to hold something even more sinister, a human presence with motives unknown. For the rangers who had first stumbled upon the disturbed soil, the realization was slow but sharp. The forest was not just keeping secrets. It was hiding them, and perhaps protecting whoever had placed the trap deep within its heart. The investigation into the booby trap shifted the disappearance from an unsolved wilderness mystery into something darker, something that suggested human hands had played a role in the hiker's fate. Once the rangers reported their discovery, law enforcement and forensic teams descended on the area, their presence breaking the silence of the forest that had guarded its secret for so long. What had once been seen as an accident, a tragic misstep of an aging outdoorsman, was now recast in a chilling new light. The implications were unsettling. If the elderly hiker had vanished because of the trap, then someone had deliberately set a deadly device in the wilderness. If the hiker himself had built it, then questions of survival, desperation, or even madness haunted the possibilities. The trap itself was carefully dismantled, each component catalogued and bagged for study. The sharpened stakes, the bent sapling, the weathered rope, all crude in design but effective. The investigators noted how it was hidden with precision, using natural debris to disguise its placement. This was not an amateur's work. Someone had thought through the mechanics, anticipating how a body would move through the trail, how to maximize the chances of injury or death. The deliberateness of it unsettled even the most seasoned officers. Attention then turned to the torn scrap of fabric found nearby. Weathered and faded, it had clearly endured seasons of wind, snow, and rain. Yet its color matched the jacket the missing hiker was last seen wearing. Forensics confirmed it was fabric consistent with that era and brand, but tests could not conclusively prove it belonged to him. Still, the coincidence was too strong to ignore. The search in the surrounding area intensified, but despite days of scouring ridges, gullies, and streambeds, no remains were found. The mountains seemed to withhold their answers, offering only fragments that deepened the mystery. Speculation flourished, both within official circles and in the town that still carried the story like an open wound. Some investigators leaned toward the theory that the hiker had stumbled into someone else's hidden territory. It wasn't unheard of for survivalists or recluses to live deep in the Rockies, avoiding civilization. Such people might have seen outsiders as threats and laid traps to ward them off. If that was the case, then the elderly man might have unknowingly crossed a line and paid the price. But if that were true, who was the trap meant for? And was the builder still out there? Others considered a more unsettling idea, that the hiker had built the trap himself. Perhaps, stranded and unable to find his way back, he had crafted defenses against predators or imagined enemies. Isolation, hunger, and fear could unravel even the sharpest mind, turning reason into paranoia. The possibility that he had descended into such desperation disturbed those who had known him. Friends and family rejected the idea outright. He had been measured, calm, a man who respected the land rather than feared it. They couldn't reconcile that image with someone lashing together weapons in the woods. The forest began to feel different to those who patrolled it. Rangers admitted, off record, that their usual routes carried a new edge of tension. Every fallen branch, every tangle of undergrowth seemed capable of hiding something dangerous. Some carried the unease that the hiker had not been the only one out there, that the wilderness was home to someone still living unseen, guarding secrets. It was no longer just the bears and storms they had to fear, but the possibility of traps hidden in the silence. In town, the discovery reignited interest in the case. Conversations that had grown quiet over the years surged again, filled with speculation. Some locals swore they had always believed foul play was involved. Others spun theories of secret hideouts, forgotten mines, or people living entirely off-grid. Rumors grew into folklore, a recluse stalking the forest, a hidden figure who marked the land as their own. Teenagers traded stories of hearing strange metallic sounds in the woods, or seeing figures move at the edge of firelight during camping trips. Each tale blurred the line between fact and fear, feeding into the growing aura of dread surrounding the area. For the investigators, the most frustrating truth was that they had more questions than answers. The trap proved intention, but not identity. The fabric proved presence, but not fate. Without a body, without more evidence, the case teetered between possibilities: murder, accident, or self-inflicted madness. Theories spiraled, but none could be proven. As weeks passed and the immediate investigation slowed, one fact lingered like a shadow: the forest had given up just enough to keep people asking, but not enough to bring closure. The trap was no simple curiosity, it was a warning. Whether left by the vanished hiker or by someone else, it suggested that the wilderness was not just indifferent, but perhaps hostile, shaped by hands unseen. Rangers began to close off the area, citing safety, but locals knew the truth ran deeper. The Rockies, vast and untamed, had always been dangerous, but this was different. This was deliberate. This was human. And that realization changed everything about how people viewed the disappearance. The wilderness might not have claimed the old man at all. Something in it had. The discovery of the booby trap spread quickly, first among rangers and investigators, and then into the veins of the town where the story of the vanished hiker had never truly died. Within days, the news reached every diner booth, grocery line, and barstool conversation. People who had grown used to speaking of the hiker's disappearance in hushed, resigned tones now spoke with a new urgency. The mystery had not only returned, it had deepened, and with it came an unsettling realization. The Rockies were no longer seen merely as a place of natural danger, but as a landscape that might be hiding human malice. Authorities tried to control the narrative. Press releases spoke carefully, acknowledging the trap but refusing to speculate on who had built it or why. Official statements framed it as a rare and isolated hazard, one that was dismantled and no longer a threat. But the vagueness only fed suspicion. Locals wanted answers. Was the trap connected to the missing hiker? Was it proof of foul play? Or was it the work of someone still out there, quietly watching the woods? With so many questions unanswered, rumors thrived like fire in dry grass. Hikers and outdoor enthusiasts reacted with a mix of fear and fascination. Some swore off the backcountry altogether, unwilling to risk stumbling into something similar. Outfitters and gear shops noticed a decline in sales, while trailheads that once bustled with life grew strangely quiet. Yet, for others, the discovery added a sinister thrill to the wilderness. Amateur sleuths and urban explorers began to hike into the Rockies in search of other traps or signs of a hidden recluse. Posts on online forums buzzed with speculation. Photos of broken branches or odd formations in the woods passed around as evidence. Some claimed to have found more disturbances in the soil, though none could be proven. The family of the missing hiker found no comfort in the discovery. For them, the trap was not just a strange artifact of survival or hostility, it was a cruel reminder that he might have suffered, caught in its mechanism with no one to help. His daughter, who had walked those trails year after year searching for answers, now had to imagine her father's final moments entwined with sharp stakes and hidden dangers. The image was unbearable, yet she clung to the hope that at least it meant he had not simply vanished without trace. If the trap was connected to him, then somewhere nearby, more answers might still be found. The forest itself seemed to change in the public imagination. Once it had been viewed as vast but indifferent, a place of beauty that demanded respect. Now it was regarded with suspicion, as though its trees had become accomplices in concealing something darker. Rangers reported that their patrols felt different, heavier, more watchful. Each sound in the underbrush carried an edge, each snapped twig could have been the warning of something more than an animal. Some rangers admitted, quietly, that they carried their sidearms with a little more readiness than before. As weeks passed, conspiracy theories flourished. Some believed the trap was part of a network, set by someone living entirely off the grid, defending territory with lethal deterrence. Others went further, suggesting the forest itself was being used as a hiding ground for criminal activity, illegal hunting operations, smuggling routes, even secret cults. Theories that once sounded ridiculous gained traction simply because no one could disprove them. Every unanswered question was fuel, and the silence of the mountains provided endless room for speculation. The authorities closed off the area where the trap was found, citing safety concerns. Warning signs were posted, and patrols increased. But for the community, the closure was not reassuring. It felt like a quiet admission that something was truly wrong, that the forest held threats beyond the reach of ordinary hikers. Parents forbade their children from exploring the trails alone. Campgrounds that once rang with laughter at night grew sparse, their fire pits left cold. Still, there were whispers that the hiker's story was not over. Some swore he might still be alive, transformed by years of survival, setting traps not out of malice but necessity. Others believed the opposite, that he had stumbled into someone else's hidden world and paid the price, his body hidden in a place no one had yet dared to find. Each possibility was worse than the other, and each left the town with the same gnawing truth: the forest had not surrendered its secret. In the end, the discovery of the trap did not close the case, it cracked it wide open. Instead of answers, it left fear, fascination, and endless speculation. The Rockies loomed larger than before, their beauty now tinged with menace. For those who lived in the shadow of the mountains, the mystery was no longer just about one man's disappearance. It had become a reminder that some places are not merely wild but deliberately guarded, and that the forest was not just keeping its secrets, it was protecting them.